The stage lights dimmed, and from the shadows emerged a small, barefoot boy holding a microphone that seemed too large for his fragile hands. His dark eyes glanced nervously at the towering judges' table and the sea of strangers staring back at him, waiting to see what he would do. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he introduced himself, saying his name was Mateo, a boy from a small fishing village in the Philippines. In that moment, his story began to unfold, not with grand gestures or polished confidence, but with the raw honesty of a child who had carried burdens far beyond his years. He spoke softly of his mother, who worked day and night to keep their home standing, and of his little sister, who often cried herself to sleep from hunger. Every word carried weight, every pause revealed a lifetime of struggle hidden behind his gentle face. The audience, usually buzzing with chatter, grew utterly silent, captivated not by spectacle but by sincerity. For many watching, it was as if the world suddenly shrank, the distance between the glimmering stage in America and the quiet shores of a poor Philippine village collapsing into one shared heartbeat. There was no arrogance in his tone, no rehearsed dramatics, only a boy's desperate hope that his voice could change something, that it could feed his family, that it could lift them from the darkness they had lived in for so long. In that fragile introduction, people did not see just a contestant, they saw resilience, courage, and the quiet strength of a child who refused to give up. By the time he finished speaking, tears already welled in the eyes of strangers, and an unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. This was not just another performance, this was a life waiting to be transformed. The music began to play, a simple piano melody that seemed to float in the air, and Mateo closed his eyes as if to shut out the world and draw strength from somewhere deep inside. The first note that left his lips was soft, almost fragile, but it carried a power that no one expected. It was the kind of sound that reached past the ears and went straight to the heart. His voice trembled at first, the uncertainty of a boy unaccustomed to stages this grand, but with each word, his courage grew. He sang not just a song, but his story, the nights he spent watching his mother break her back to keep them alive, the mornings when he woke to an empty plate, the quiet moments when he held his sister and promised her that one day things would be better. Each note was like a prayer, raw and unpolished, yet pure in its truth. The audience leaned in, as though afraid to miss a single breath of his performance. Some closed their eyes, letting the emotion wash over them, while others stared at the boy in disbelief, wondering how so much soul could live in someone so young. His voice soared higher, carrying pain, but also hope. A rare, shining kind of hope that reminded everyone in the theater of their own struggles, their own moments of doubt, and the strength it takes to keep moving forward. By the time he reached the middle of the song, the trembling was gone, replaced by a steady, powerful tone that filled every corner of the auditorium. People began to rise to their feet, clapping through tears, urging him on with their voices and their hearts. In that moment, Mateo was no longer a poor boy, he was a beacon, a reminder that greatness can rise from the most humble beginnings. As Mateo's song carried on, something extraordinary began to unfold beyond his voice. Behind him, the giant screen lit up with glimpses of his life, images that told the story his words alone could not capture. There he was, barefoot in the market, carrying buckets of water twice his size. Another image showed him gently holding his little sister, comforting her as she wiped tears from her hungry eyes. A shot of his mother appeared, her hands worn and tired from years of labor, yet still holding on to love and hope. The audience gasped, realizing the truth behind the trembling voice they were hearing. Mateo was not simply performing, he was surviving, and this song was his lifeline. His voice grew richer with every note, like a tide rising higher and higher, no longer fragile but fierce with determination. The melody cracked open the hearts of strangers who, moments ago, knew nothing of this boy. Now they felt as if they had walked beside him through the dusty streets of his village, tasted the bitterness of hunger, and shared in the quiet prayers whispered at night. People in the audience began wiping away tears, parents holding their children tighter, couples reaching for each other's hands. Even the judges, often known for their hard exteriors, sat frozen in awe. The boy's pain had become universal, his story a mirror reflecting the struggles of millions. Yet there was no despair in his voice, only hope, raw and defiant. Each lyric became a message, that no matter how hard life presses you down, there is always something within, waiting to rise. By the time he reached the climax, his voice soared with such purity and force that the entire theater was on its feet, clapping, cheering, crying. In that moment, his struggle became everyone's, and his courage became their inspiration. The final note hung in the air like a prayer, trembling yet triumphant, and for a breathless moment the entire theater fell into silence. It was the kind of silence that spoke louder than applause, a silence where thousands of hearts beat as one, suspended between awe and disbelief. Then, like a wave crashing onto the shore, the audience erupted. People leapt to their feet, clapping, cheering, shouting his name through tears that glistened in the stage lights. Mateo stood frozen, clutching the microphone, his chest rising and falling as if he could not believe what he had just done. His eyes searched the judges' faces, unsure if he had truly reached them. And then it happened. Simon Cowell leaned forward, his usually sharp gaze softened with emotion, and he stood up slowly, as though overcome by something larger than himself. Without hesitation, he slammed his hand down on the golden buzzer. In an instant, golden confetti burst from the ceiling, cascading down in a shimmering rain that wrapped around Mateo like a dream. The boy dropped to his knees, his tiny hands covering his face as sobs shook his body. He wasn't crying because he had won, but because for the first time in his life he felt seen, felt worthy, felt loved by a world that had so often forgotten children like him. The judges rose to their feet, clapping through their tears, while the audience screamed with joy, waving their arms as if to lift the boy higher. The stage, once intimidating and cold, now felt like home, bathed in gold and the warmth of thousands of hearts united in admiration. As Mateo lifted his tear-streaked face to the lights, confetti sticking to his hair, he wasn't just a poor boy anymore, he was a symbol of hope, shining brighter than the stage itself. When the golden confetti finally settled, Mateo was still on his knees, his small hands trembling as he clutched the microphone. The stage was drenched in gold, but the true glow came from the thousands of faces shining with admiration and love. Simon Cowell, breaking the usual barrier between judge and performer, rose from his chair and walked across the stage. He bent down and gently pulled the boy into his arms, holding him the way a father might hold a child who had carried far too much weight alone. The audience gasped at the rare tenderness, and the boy buried his face against Simon's shoulder, overwhelmed by the embrace. Into the microphone, Simon's voice cracked slightly as he spoke. "Mateo, you reminded us all tonight that talent isn't about where you come from or what you have, it's about the heart you sing with. And your heart is extraordinary." The crowd roared, some cheering, others wiping their tears, moved not only by the performance but by the kindness unfolding before them. Mateo lifted his face, his eyes wet but shining, and smiled through his tears. He raised one small hand toward the audience, as if reaching out to everyone who had cheered for him, everyone who believed in him when he had almost stopped believing in himself. In that moment, he was no longer the poor boy from a fishing village. He was proof that dreams could travel oceans, that a child's voice could move mountains, that hope could blossom even in the harshest soil. The camera panned across the theater, capturing strangers hugging, parents holding their children close, and even the toughest judge wiping his eyes. As the applause thundered on, Mateo stood tall in the shower of gold, his story etched forever into the hearts of millions. It was not just a victory for him, it was a reminder to the world that compassion, courage, and faith can turn the smallest voices into the loudest songs of hope.